Hey there. So, I was in a coffee shop the other day, scrolling through my phone, and I saw yet another meme. It was one of those historical rivals images. You know the type, two figures facing off, with some dramatic caption about honor and battle. And this one was Saladin and Richard the Lionheart. And it hit me, right between the sips of my admittedly overpriced latte, how simple that picture is. How clean. Two legendary warriors, locked in a duel of chivalry during the Crusades. A noble conflict. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that noble conflict is, in part, a story they decided to tell about themselves? Welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is The Great Conversation, a podcast where we pull on the threads of history to see what unravels. Today, in episode 46, Saladin versus Richard, the manufactured chivalry of the Third Crusade. Let's set the scene. It's the late 12th century. The Christian kingdom of Jerusalem has fallen to the forces of Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, Saladin. The shockwaves ripple through Europe, and the Third Crusade is launched. Its shining star is Richard I, King of England, the Lionheart. He arrives in the Holy Land in 1191, and what follows is a brutal, grinding war of attrition over the coastal city of Acre and the road to Jerusalem itself. The history books are filled with dates and battles. But I want to talk about the space between the battles. The letters exchanged, the gifts sent, the stories that began to circulate. Because here's the first thing to understand. Both Richard and Saladin were in impossibly difficult positions. Richard was a world away from home, his authority constantly undermined by rival crusade leaders like Philip II of France and Leopold V of Austria. His supply lines were stretched, his army was melting away from disease and desertion, and he knew that political chaos awaited him back in England. Saladin, meanwhile, was not some unchallenged sultan. He was the leader of a fragile coalition of emirs and generals, each with their own ambitions. His military reputation had taken a hit from the losses to Richard, and holding his alliance together was a daily act of political wizardry. For both men, an outright, total military victory was becoming a mirage. And so, a fascinating thing happens. They begin to cultivate a personal rivalry, a noble one. There are these famous anecdotes. When Richard's horse is killed at the Battle of Arsuf, Saladin is said to have sent him 2 fresh steeds. When Richard falls ill with fever, Saladin supposedly sends him fresh fruit and snow from the mountains to cool his drinks. Richard, in turn, praises Saladin's greatness as a leader, and there's that famous moment where he suggests his sister could marry Saladin's brother, uniting East and West. Now, historians debate the literal truth of every single one of these stories. But that's almost the point. Whether they happened exactly as told is less important than the fact that everyone, including the principals, wanted them to be told. This is where we get into the manufacturing. For Richard, portraying Saladin as a worthy, chivalrous foe served a crucial purpose. It elevated his own struggle. Beating a savage, faceless enemy is one thing. But defeating a paragon of pagan virtue, that's the stuff of legends. It transformed a costly, strategically stalled military campaign into a personal duel of giants. It gave Richard a glorious narrative to send back to Europe, a story that could overshadow the ugly realities of the campaign, like his massacre of thousands of Muslim prisoners at Acre, an act that starkly contradicts the chivalric myth. For Saladin, engaging in this theater of respect was a masterstroke of political and psychological warfare. By acting the part of the magnanimous sultan, he was speaking directly to the fishers in the Crusader camp. He was presenting himself not as a devil, but as a reasonable, honorable man you could negotiate with. This sowed doubt and discord among the Crusaders, many of whom were just exhausted and wanted to go home. Why fight to the death against a man who sends you gifts and shows mercy? Furthermore, it bolstered his own image across the Islamic world as a leader of not just power, but of principle and adab, refined virtue. And we, the audience centuries later, bought the front-row tickets to this show. Our main sources, like the chronicler Baha ad-Din ibn Shaddad on Saladin's side, and the itinerarium Regis Ricardi on Richard's, are filled with these moments. They are constructing an ideal, a template for how great leaders should behave, even in war. It's literary and historical analysis wrapped into one. We're seeing the birth of a trope, the worthy adversaries, bound by a code that transcends their cause. But we cannot let this romantic narrative obscure the ground truth. This was a war of immense suffering. The land between Acre and Jaffa was scorched, towns were razed, people were displaced and slaughtered regardless of these high-minded exchanges. The chivalry was a luxury item, a performance for the kings and the chroniclers. For the common soldier, the peasant, the civilian caught in the middle, the Third Crusade was not about gifts of fruit or horses. It was about survival amidst the relentless machinery of holy war. So what are we left with? We're left with two incredibly savvy leaders who understood the power of narrative. They were, in a way, early masters of public relations. Trapped in a military stalemate, they pivoted to a contest of reputation. They began writing a story that was more compelling, more enduring, and ultimately more useful to their legacies than the messy, inconclusive war they were actually fighting. The manufactured chivalry wasn't a lie, per se. It was a strategy, a way to salvage glory from a situation where total victory was slipping away from both of them. It makes me think about the stories we tell today, the rivalries we frame, the narratives we construct about our own lives and our conflicts. How much of it is for an audience, external or internal? How much of it is a performance to achieve a goal, to shape a legacy, to make sense of a struggle that doesn't have a clean ending? Richard and Saladin understood that history is written by the winners, but they also intuited something deeper, that history is remembered by the stories that resonate. And a story of mutual respect, of a clash of titans on a level playing field of virtue, is far more resonant than a story of a muddy, bloody, inconclusive slog. In the end, the Third Crusade ended with a treaty. Richard never set foot in Jerusalem. Saladin kept the city but granted Christian pilgrims access. It was a practical, unsatisfying compromise. But the legend they built, the legend of the Lionheart and the noble Sultan, that was a triumph. It conquered the imagination of the world for centuries to come, turning a strategic draw into a timeless story of chivalry. They didn't just fight a war, they authored a myth, and we've been reading it ever since. Thanks for joining me for this conversation. If you enjoyed this dive into the stories behind the history, please do share the episode with someone who'd appreciate it. You can find more episodes and transcripts at our production home, Light Not Studios. https://www.lightnotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, keep questioning the stories you're told.